Let's Take This Outside with Marianne Iveson, the podcast where she speaks to athletes, outdoor professionals, and scientists about why they connect with nature.
Ted Kalil is the chair of Nordic Canada and a strong ally to females in sport. Ted's love for the outdoors started at the age of 9 attending Camp Nominingue in the Laurentians, with ties to the legendary Jackrabbit Johannsen, who effectively introduced Nordic skiing to North America. As a father to 3 daughters, Ted has a passion for supporting women in sport. He served for years on the board of Fast and Female and moved over to the Nordic Canada board, where he now serves as the chair since 2021. Ted has also been participating in the Canadian Ski Marathon every year since 2018, including twice completing the Courrier de Bois Bronze, which is a 2-day, 160-kilometer ski. Please welcome my new friend, Ted Kalil. Ted, welcome to Let's Take This Outside.
Thanks for having me on. This is really exciting.
This is so appropriate because I'm currently wearing my merino base layer and my cross-country ski pants. So there's a huge storm coming through Ottawa, and maybe in Montreal you'll get it as well. But it's going to be about 10 to 25 centimeters of snow. But I'm going to Nakurtalk this afternoon, right when we're done, and I'm going to go skiing, cross-country skiing for the first time this season. So I think it's really appropriate that we're having this conversation right now.
Yeah, well, that's great. I mean, Nakurtalk, they're so fortunate they have the artificial snowmaking, so they can build the Nakur track before the rest of us actually see real snow. And you're actually really lucky up in the Ottawa-Gatineau area. Right? You've got, I mean, not just the park, but you've got some great clubs up there like Nakurtalk and Ski-Nook and Chelsea Nordic. They're just a phenomenal cross-country ski community in the area. You guys are really fortunate up there.
Have you been out yet?
I've not been out on skis yet, hoping that the snow is supposed to be, we're supposed to be getting a foot of it here in Montreal as well. So I'm pretty psyched for the weekend. And otherwise, just out on my Nordic, trying to do a bit of running or on the bike in the basement kind of thing. So it's all good.
This is like the most incestuous podcast because the last interview I did was with Michael Bennett at Eurosports, and they carry Norda, and I've been trying to get Norda on for a while. Norda is they make trail running shoes. Are they in Montreal? I know they're in Quebec.
They are out in the Eastern Townships, but they're both Nick and Willa, who I know from my high school days, because English Montreal is a pretty small town. They're originally from Montreal, but yeah, they're in the townships. In fact, if you take your Nordas and you flip them upside down and look at the sole, the Vibram sole they have, it's actually a topographical map of the St. Lawrence Valley.
What?
Yeah, take a look. Take your shoes,
Okay.
Flip them over. It's super cool.
Okay, I'm going to do it afterwards. I might take a picture. They're probably muddy, but once I clean them, I'll be able to see it.
Oh, good.
Okay, how you and I met, I'm putting in air quotes because we met virtually, is my podcast guy, producer Matt Kundle told me months ago that you and I should chat. Maybe he did the same for you, but we're finally doing this. And I know you and Matt, you guys are like childhood friends, right?
Yeah, we go back to early days of high school, grade 7, grade 8, something like that, and gone on lots of various, just call them expeditions and leave it at that.
I'm really excited to talk to you today. I don't think I've had this angle yet specifically on the show when it comes to this kind of leadership in the outdoor community, like being on the board for Fast and Female and Nordic Canada. But let's start with where your passion for the outdoors began. As a boy at summer camp in the Laurentians in Quebec, this camp, though, had some super cool connections. I want to hear about your experience, but also the connections to cross-country skiing.
Yeah. So when I was 9 years old, my parents sent me to Camp Nominingue up in the Laurentians. It's a camp that's been around since 1925, so coming up on its 100 years. It's camp for boys, and if you go back 100 years ago, that's what they did, right? There was girls' camps and boys' camps. So that's really where I started to really get introduced to the outdoors. It's where my love for cedar canvas canoes comes from. The camp actually builds its own cedar canvas canoes. They have molds there, and they still to this day still make canoes. Put me in a cedar canvas, and yeah, that's my happy place. The founder of the camp back then was a gentleman named F.M. Van Wagner, who at the time was a phys ed professor at McGill. And he really wanted to introduce young people to the outdoors. And yeah, the neat connection was that he was great friends with Jackrabbit Johannsen, the legendary Jackrabbit, who lived to 111 years old and basically introduced cross-country skiing to North America. And it was super cool. One of the things that several years back, I was reading Jackrabbit's biography, which is written by his daughter. And the very, very last page, like the last paragraph, she was kind of painting this image of her father in his later years sitting in his living room by the fire and reminiscing of his days in the outdoors and reciting a line from Henry David Thoreau's book, Walden. And the line is, "Rise free from care before the dawn and seek adventure. Let the noon find thee by other lakes and the night overtake thee everywhere at home." And then she goes on to say that line from Thoreau's book, Walden, is a line that he learned visiting his good friend F.M. Van Wagner at Camp Nominingue. Okay, I read that and I got shivers, right? There's like my two worlds colliding, like my cross country world and my canoe world. Like, whoa, this all appeared on the same page, right? This is like watching this movie where you suddenly get the plot line all of a sudden in the last scene. And so that line that from Thoreau, that's kind of the camp's motto, and every camper who ever attended that camp pretty much knows that by memory. I think there's some people probably got it tattooed or something, and certainly have it written out on their paddles and that kind of thing. And that line I think is really motivating for those of us who sometimes sit behind desks a little too long in our day jobs and just want to get out. Whether that getting out is Gatineau Park for those of you who are in your area, or just up on Mount Royal in the middle of Montreal here, or heading out to the Laurentians, or going down to Vermont or New Hampshire, whatever it is that we like to do. It's always good to keep that line in mind.
You have a day job also. You're not just a guy who likes to talk about canoes.
No, in fact, yeah, my day job is sitting at a desk. So, when I look at the people you've had on your podcast, right? I mean, you got PhDs in outdoor stuff. You got the guys from Exact Nutrition. You've had Ray Zahab on here. Right? It's like, I'm sitting there going, why'd you call me? I just sit at a desk.
Don't you worry, you spend enough time in the outdoors / making a difference that I wanted to talk. And honestly, too, like the Ray Zahabs of the world are these incredible human beings who are so inspirational. But I think people who have day jobs are also, relatable. Anyways, we need both the inspiration and we need also the relatable. And you have a family, you have 3 daughters. We're going to talk about that too and how this all kind of ties in. But I also wanted to ask, canoeing really big for you. What else do you love spending time doing outdoors?
Yeah. So, I grew up in a hockey family, and the outdoors again came to me indirectly. When I was really young, my dad would take us out, perch fishing on the St. Lawrence River. He grew up in Cornwall, Ontario, but then going to Nominingue, learning canoe tripping and canoeing and stuff, and all the other outdoor activities we did there. Then when I was at university, I went to Queen's, actually did my undergrad in geography. I joined the outdoors club when I was there, and we did stuff. We did rock climbing, we did winter camping, we did canoeing, whitewater canoeing. We were kayaking in the university swimming pool in the middle of winter. I mean, you name it. So the outdoors just kind of started coming from everywhere. And then after university, I was spending a lot of time in Vermont with old high school buddies that we would meet up on weekends. It's just a pretty short drive from Montreal for a weekend. And we started doing our own cross-country ski races that were kind of a bit of a poker derby / I won't get into the details. It may have involved some Jägermeister, but that's off the record, right? You won't repeat that.
This is definitely not being recorded or anything.
No, this is not being recorded. Yeah. And yeah, so the love of the outdoors was just kind of a whole life thing. I can't really point to any one specific, like this was the light bulb moment. It just was gradually there and just kept growing. And then, as I said, I grew up with hockey and ended up in the early mid-90s. I was asked by a friend, she was an old grade school friend, and she'd started playing hockey in the local municipal women's league, and they needed a coach. And she called me up and said, can you come coach our hockey team, our women's hockey team? And I was, sure, absolutely. And I was coaching it. And that's what probably, really woke me up to the challenges that women's sport had in today's world. Because I was coaching, I'd go to coaching certification clinics, and the other guys, and it's very much an old boys club, would look and say, "Oh, you're coaching women, so is that ring gay?" I'm like, "No, it's hockey." Like, really? Right? This was before women were actually at the Olympics too, right? I mean, now Marie-Philippe Poulin, Hayley Wickenheiser, like they're all legends in Canada, but at this time, nobody really knew much about women's hockey. So it opened my eyes pretty quickly to the challenges that women's sport had. And then, as you said, then later on, I got married and had 3 daughters, and So I live with four women. I'm a very proud feminist. And it, started one day, ended up having a conversation with Marie-Hélène Thibault. And Marie-Hélène, everyone calls her M&H. When she was at school in the United States, nobody could pronounce Marie-Hélène, so they called her M&H. And she and I ended up having a conversation. M&H was at the time the executive director of Fast and Female, working closely with Chandra Crawford. It was Chandra who founded it. But Chandra was racing World Cups at the time, so she was in Europe most of the winter, cross-country skiing. Chandra, of course, had won gold in the sprint at the Olympics in Torino. And, after that, Fast and Female really took off. And it was all about finding ways to help keep girls in sport, because we know the statistics show teenage girls are at like 6 times the risk. I forget the exact stat, but something like 6 times the risk of dropping out of sport as teenagers as compared to boys.
Just very quick interjection. Molly Herford, who is on this podcast, she's a cyclist and writes a lot. She's incredible. But she has a stat it was something along the lines of both boys and girls start out cycling. And then it was like a ridiculous amount of women dropped off when they turned like teenage years. So clearly it's in every sport. Sorry, continue on the fast.
Yeah, and we could spend 3 hours on this podcast talking about that one subject and then turn it into a week, probably a university lecture course on it. But, in a nutshell, one of the things that's just really obvious is that you turn on the mass media or you open up, back then we actually had print newspaper still, right? You open up the paper and the front page of the sports section was all men's sports, right? It's everywhere. Whereas women's sports, maybe you'd see it at the Olympics, perhaps you get a tennis player or something, but the role models for boys were really obvious. They're there in the mass media all the time. The role models for girls in terms of female sports are phenomenal. Like they're fantastic role models, but they're just not obvious in the mass media. And so Fast and Female in its early days was about bringing those role models to girls and showing them that it's possible, not only possible, but that most of these phenomenal female athletes are actually fantastic students. They did really, really well at school. And so are real role models for life, not just for sport. And so I started working with M&H a little bit, Fast and Female, just kind of helping them on a couple little things. And then one day they asked me to join the board. I ended up being on the board for 8 years, served 4 years as board chair. And then because I was working with Chandra, who was the founder, and she was on the board, and then her good friend, Keegan Randall, who's on the U.S. Olympic ski team, the U.S. national team, and went on to win gold herself in the team sprint along with Jessie Diggins. I was seeing how the U.S. women's program was starting to get more support and doing really well. And the Canadian women's program had some gaps in it that just were basically funding gaps in the challenges that all amateur sport has in Canada with funding. And Fast and Female was working very closely with what was then called Cross Country Canada, today Nordic Canada. We were a very close partnership. And so I ended up starting to work on some projects trying to help out the Canadian national women's team, which one thing led to another. And somebody suggested, hey, you should run for the board at Cross Country Canada. And my term at Fast and Female was kind of running out. And so I said, okay, let's look at that. And that was 2018. And today I'm about a year and a half into being chair of the board at Nordic Canada. So long story short, that's how I ended up here.
There are so many angles that we can take right now and so many questions I have. I first of all want to know, what does Fast and Female look like today? And if someone's listening and they have a daughter or they are interested in this, what do you know about Fast and Female and what it looks like in it's 2022 right now. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm so proud of the organization, right? It's, you kind of step away and it's like, watching your teenager grow into an adult, right? It really has evolved from when I was there and it's really grown up. It's become such a professional organization now. It's really building out to be more about presenting what they call real role models. So it doesn't have to be an Olympian, because sometimes looking up to an Olympian can be intimidating. Well, what if I'm not an Olympian, right? Or what if I don't have the skills to be an Olympian? And the idea was to show that there are real role models out there in every facet of life. And it's about how do you find them and how do you find the mentors that can help you. It's become a much more inclusive, term female. In today's world, we know that, people have different ways that they identify. So they want to be very open to that as well and very inclusive. So the organization's really evolved a lot. And then I look around and I see other organizations that have been inspired by that or grew up in parallel. Two of our Olympic skiers here in Quebec, Sandrine Brown and Laura Leclerc, they started up Feminaction. Same thing, right? They want to be on the ground working with young female skiers, keeping them in the sport. it's just great. There's so many great organizations like this that are doing the on the ground grassroots stuff, just trying to inspire girls to stay in sport, stay in school. And we know that if sport's going well, school tends to go better as well. So it's a really important thing.
If there is anything that I know I can attest to, and a lot of female athletes I know, there's a lot of pressure to perform, not only just in school, but also, well, now as an adult in work and also in sport, and athletes that I know. But like, women are not overachievers, but like there's a lot of pressure to be good at every single thing that we do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, I don't want to sit here and try to be the expert on women's psychology.
Of course, it's more from like a fatherly perspective, and also what you've seen within Fast and Female and Nordic Canada. So.
Yeah, no, for sure. And yeah, being a father and sitting down with my daughters, when you see the pressure of exams coming up, but there's practices for basketball team or volleyball team or, whatever sport happens to be going on right now, as in any facet of life, right? It's learning how to prioritize, learning how to manage stress. And, it's, what we can do as parents is just, try to help them with frameworks. But it's also managing the stress, right? I see some parents, and I don't want to sit here and judge, but some parents, I see the way they are on the sidelines of sports, and I kind of shake my head and think, do you actually want your daughter to quit? Because you keep saying that she's going to quit. Whereas, I was taught long ago the best thing you can say is actually the honest thing, which is, I just love watching you play, right? And if you're out there and you're having fun, whether you're the star that's, scoring all the goals or hitting all the 3-pointers or, whatever the sport is, or winning the races, or you're just out there just, trying hard and supporting your teammates and having fun, right? And that's the key, is that, Sport Canada has the long-term athlete development matrix, which anyone who's been involved in coaching will know what it looks like. And if you can picture a grid, it's this big giant rectangle that has all the stages of development as young kids. But then when you get to that kind of competitive age, which is late teens, early 20s, depending on the sport, it branches off into this kind of pyramid with sharp, pointy top, which is the, kind of that world champion or Olympian kind of athlete. But the biggest piece of that matrix that everyone kind of forgets about is what they call active for life. And that's the biggest part, right? Is that 1% of the kids who are doing, recreational hockey or competitive soccer or competitive cross-country skiing or whatever the sport is, 1% are going to a national team level. And then an even smaller percentage of that is, podium potential. The 99%, the goal is get them staying in sport for life, because, I mean, you look at the emergency rooms in our hospitals today, it doesn't matter what province you're in, there's a lineup to get in. And if we can find ways to make a healthier society by keeping people out of the healthcare system, that's a huge investment that as a country we should be making. And so at Nordic Canada, right, our slogan is all Canadians on skis, more athletes on podiums. And so it really is a dual mandate. And we could talk about what we mean by all Canadians on skis. That's, again, another hour-long call. But, if we can get just more people out there skiing, that, of course, is going to drive us having a greater athlete pool to find potential podium athletes in. But more importantly, it's also just going to lead to a healthier society.
I can only speak for myself and also some people that I've also on the podcast, but I think it's about, I want to hear your opinion on this too. I think like the sport for life is finding those sports and those things and the community is such a huge aspect of it too. Things that you just feel absolutely right doing, things that you absolutely love doing that maybe you don't feel pressure to do, that you're like, I can't wait to ski this afternoon because I can't wait to get fresh air with my very good friend. I'm not going to perform. It's my first time on skis. I'm just going to go get my balance back and get my legs back. But I just am obsessed with it because I get to go and play in the winter, all winter long. Like, that is why I love it so much.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, what's that line? It's a meme that keeps popping up on social media. You need to find joy in the snow, because if you don't find joy in the snow, you'll have less joy, but it's the same amount of snow.
I haven't seen that. Please share it if you see it.
I wish I knew who came up with that line so I could give it credit. But there's a gym downstairs in my office building, right? One of the big mass market, chains. And I have a membership, but gosh, I really don't go unless I'm training for an event, a big ski race coming up or something, because just going to the gym for the sake of going to the gym just it isn't motivating. But when I know that, my buddies are waiting at 6 a.m. on the bikes for a bike ride in the summer, like, you get up and you go, and the first 10 minutes are brutal, but by the time you're 20 minutes into the ride, everyone's having a great time, right? And you're like, why did we not do this every day? And the same thing with the snow, right? The first 5 or 10 minutes, you're complaining about your wax or something and you're kind of cold, but 15 minutes into it, it's, you get going, the endorphins start going, the fresh air is moving. And, a sport like cross country, you talk about active for life. It is a sport you can do for your whole life, right? You go out at the local park, or you're at the Canadian Ski Marathon, or any part of the sport, and you're going to see, the young jackrabbits who are little kids, and it could well be their 70-plus-year-old grandparents who are out there with them, and they're skiing. And believe me, I've been in races where I've literally been beaten in a race by somebody in their 70s, like easily, right? And I still play hockey. I'm in my 50s. I still play hockey. And there's a lot of my friends who look and go, yeah, I can't do it anymore because of injuries. And there are a lot of sports that are harder to do your whole life, right? Because it's tough to play tackle football your whole life. You can't play rugby your whole life. But, there are sports, be it golf or tennis or cross-country skiing or cycling, that you see people that are, well into the grandparent years and actually some cases even just starting to take it up, right? And certainly through COVID, the number of times during that 2 years or the first 2 years of COVID that I got a text message from an old hockey buddy. Do you have any skis in your garage you're trying to get rid of? Right? Or where do I find skis? How do I get in? Can you teach me how to wax my skis? Because people discovered we were naturally socially distanced and wore face coverings anyways, because that's what you do in the cold. But people were discovering that, hey, this isn't. When I was a kid, people thought of cross-country skiing as you kind of went out in a lot of wool and you hugged a tree and ate some granola and froze, right? But
that's what I do.
It's a sport that has something for everybody, right? You can go out and do that, right? If that's what you want to do, is just pack some hot chocolate and ski around, the cottage for 10 minutes. Great, go do that. If you want to put on the Lycra and go race a 50-kilometer Gatineau Loppet, go do it. If you want to just tour the Gatineau Loppet and pack a picnic with you, you can do that too, right? And if you want to go enter a provincial cup race, literally against Olympians, hey, you're allowed to enter that, and just they put you at the back of the pack so you don't block anybody. But you can actually literally go enter a race with national team athletes if that's what you want to do. You can't go jump on the ice with NHL hockey players. Right? So it's a very welcoming sport. There's a lot of sports. You got to find that sport that you're going to be passionate about and love, but they're out there. And whether it's just de-stressing from the office at the end of the day, as I said, sit at a desk a lot, and being able to stop on Mount Royal on my way home, having this beautiful park where you get out there and you forget you're in the middle of a major city is a pretty cool thing.
Let's Take This Outside merch is now available, like toques, sweaters, and t-shirts. Head to letstakethisoutside.ca and hit the store button to rep your favorite podcast. Thank you so much for supporting.
I'm actually going to do a whole episode on the Canadian Ski Marathon. However, you've been doing the CSM every year since, you said, 2007 or 2008. Can you quickly describe the basics of what it is and the structure of bronze, silver, and gold? Because this is one of the and this is why I'm doing a whole episode with Réal Perriard, is that it's one of the most hardcore sporting events in Canada. I don't know if you agree or not. I think it is, but I would love to know a little bit more.
It absolutely can be, but I want your listeners out there who are not into the hardcore to say, wait, stop. There's something for everybody in this event.
Absolutely.
There is something for everyone. You don't have to be a hardcore skier to do this event. So they have a few different categories. There's what we call tourers. There's the half marathon, and then there's the Coureur de Bois. And the Coureur de Bois is the hardcore you're talking about.
That's the hardcore. Thank you.
That's the hardcore thing. And so the Canadian Ski Marathon is 2 days, typically early February. And the traditional route would be from Lachute, stopping overnight in Montebello, and then continuing on to Gatineau. And in recent years, they actually added a third leg to kind of mix it up a little bit, where it's been from Tremblant to Montebello, and then Montebello to Gatineau, or Montebello to Lachute. So they mix up the routes each year to keep a little bit of variety. And what you can do is, as a tourer, you can say, I want to sign up to just do a little part of it. You don't have to do the whole thing. And a little part of it is each day is broken up into 5 sections. So you can find one section that's maybe 12 kilometers or 10 kilometers or something. So I'm just doing that. And your challenge might be, I've never skied 10 kilometers in my life, and I want to train all winter to be able to ski 10 kilometers. And for a lot of people, like that's a lifetime achievement, and that's awesome. And you go out and you do it at your pace, and you pack a backpack with a picnic, and off you go. But at the other extreme, and I'm going to use that term extreme very advisedly, he's doing what we call the coureur de bois. And that's you're trying to ski the whole distance. And so there you're starting at 6 a.m. And 6 a.m. in February in Canada means, with a headlamp on because it's dark.
And freezing, probably.
Yeah. And you're trying to ski the entire distance of that Lachute to Gatineau or Tremblant to Gatineau.
How far is that?
160 kilometers over 2 days. So you've got 80 kilometers per day. And there's time checks, right? So you got to start the last of the 5 sections each day by 3:30, I believe it is. So 3:15, 3:30 in the afternoon. So for some of us, that's a pace we got to almost be racing for 65 kilometers to make that time check. So they let you ski the last 15 each day. So it's extreme in that for a lot of us, it's the psychological extreme, right? Like you always say, if you're able to train to the point where you can actually ski 40 or 50 kilometers in training, then you can ski 160 kilometers. Physically, you're able to do it. The question is, can you pace yourself? Can you get the hydration, the food, the clothing, the pacing, but the mental part of it? Because there's so many parts of it that anywhere after 40K, doesn't matter who you are, it's going to start to hurt. And your brain's going to look at that school bus they have at each of the checkpoints and think, you know what, I could get on that bus and go to the Chateau Montebello and sit by the fire and have a Bailey's and espresso instead. Or I can keep skiing, finish today's 80K, and then go do it again tomorrow. Right? And there's a lot of times where your brain's going, why am I doing this? And every time I've been involved in any distance race, including Gatineau Loppet, shorter stuff, 50Ks, whatever, is at some point in that event, I swear to myself, I will never, ever do another event longer than 5 kilometers again. Right? Like it's guaranteed, right? Like I'm never doing this again. And I cross the finish line and my wife, Stephanie, says, how'd it go? And I go, just make sure I don't sign up for this event again. Right. But the unofficial motto of the Canadian Ski Marathon, of anyone who's done the Coureur de Bois, is never again until next year. ... Yeah. Yeah.
So bronze, silver, and gold get more hardcore as you go, right?
Right. So for those who decide they want to do the Coureur de Bois, which is attempting the full 160 kilometers over 2 days, you start with what's called bronze. And bronze is just trying to ski the whole distance over the 2 days. And you can go after each day is done, the Saturday night, you can either, go to the dormitory at one of the local high schools and sleep on the gym floor if you want, or you can find a nice, B&B or check into the Chateau Montebello and be at a 5-star hotel and go to the all-you-can-eat buffet. Whatever you want to do in between, that's your business.
That would be the most hardcore I would go on this. Continue. Sorry.
And then if you achieve bronze, then you're allowed in the future years to try silver, which is repeating the same distance, but carrying a 5-kilogram backpack. Doesn't matter what's in the pack. I've heard all kinds of stories. People just shove sandbags in. Some people pack full-on first aid kits, a change of clothes, a pair of boots they'll change. Others have brought, the full works of William Shakespeare, whatever motivates you. Throw it in your pack and just ski. You got to just be able to do the whole distance with that weight. If you achieve silver, then you're allowed to try gold. And for the record, I've done bronze twice. I've failed at silver twice. Okay, just to keep things in perspective. If you achieve silver, you're then allowed to attempt gold. Gold is, again, skiing the whole distance, but this time what you have in your backpack is what you need for the overnight on Saturday because you're sleeping outside. And you've got to camp out outside. They have something called Gold Camp, and I've skied by it when I've done my bronze or what have you, and it looks like something out of like Braveheart, right? It's all these guys who've been skiing for 80 kilometers. And you can imagine how tired you are after that and what you kind of look like. And they're sitting on hay bales around. There's just a field of campfires, trying to change into something dry, trying to eat enough food so they can actually sleep and get rested and get fueled up so they can get up and ski another 80 tomorrow. And it's just this big cloud of smoke and all these really haggard looking people. And then the next day they get up and they do it. And they just trudge along. And some of them ski it really fast and others just barely make the cutoff. But it's super motivating. But at the same time, on the same trail, you have the people doing the tours who are out there just trying to do one section a day. And you'll see little kids, out there with their grandparents because their parents may be doing the Coureur de Bois or something, right? It's a whole family event. You get 3 or 4 generations doing it together. You'll have, retired Olympians who are out there doing it. You'll have young kids who are on the race teams but took a week off of racing so they could come do the marathon. So you get the full gamut. It's the full Canadian skiing society. So when you say it's extreme, it is if you're at one end of it, but you can also choose to just be very recreational about it too. So there's something there for everybody for sure.
That makes me really excited to do a whole episode on it. So I have one more question specifically about the women's side of sport. I just wanted to know, what challenges do you see on the women's side of sport, and how have you seen it progress, especially in the last few years? And what do you think are still the big challenges ahead?
I think the biggest challenge is, and it depends on the sport. Some sports are at different stages of it than others. A lot of it is getting enough women coaches into the sports. And, we're starting to see that growth coming. And a lot of that, what we're seeing in skiing, a lot of where we're going to find the best coaches is those competitive athletes who are competitive in their teens. And they maybe get to 14, 15, 16 years old and decide they don't want to race anymore at a high level. The time demands of it are getting bigger, or perhaps they have a different sport that they're more competitive in and don't have the time to be a competitive ski racer. But their skills are fantastic and they want to stay involved in the sport somehow. And they're actually turning out to be some of the best coaches we can have for our young jackrabbits, right? The jackrabbits, if you think of like Timbits in hockey, right? It's the little kids, obviously named after Herman Jackrabbit Johannsen. And that's our ski school, our ski development program that all of the clubs, go to nordiccanada.ca and find a club near you and sign up for it, get your kids in it, is, sorry, I had to get the plug in.
No, you got to get the plug in. You got to get the plug in.
Yeah. A lot of these young athletes who don't want to race anymore, they have fantastic skills. They have the right technique, and they relate to the young kids better than us volunteer parents who are showing up, because my daughters who don't ski race anymore, but they did until they were, kind of 14, 15, their technique is far better than mine. And for a young girl or even a young boy who's, 6, 7, 8 years old, to look up to some 40 or 50-year-old parent trying to show technique, or looking up to a 16, 17-year-old who's showing technique, is a very different world of motivation. And the technique's much better. And so if we can find these young athletes who maybe don't want to race anymore, but keep them active for life in a coaching role, that's where we're going to find our future coaches who can then work up to, provincial level coaching, high performance level coaching, and eventually get to our top level coaching. At Nordic Canada, if I look at the top of our high performance pyramid within the organization is what we call our high performance director. And all the coaches and everybody, in theory, work underneath the high performance director. And we actually have 2 high performance directors, one for what we call the Olympic stream and what we call one for the Paralympic stream. And, Kate Boyd, who's from the Gatineau region originally, lives out in Canmore. She's our high performance director of the Paralympic stream. And our Para-Nordic program at Nordic Canada has, I can't remember the exact stats, so don't quote me, but something like half of Canada's medals at the Winter Paralympics are from our Nordic skiers.
Incredible.
And we're really proud of our Para-Nordic program, and that's headed up by Kate, who worked her way up through the system. So the more we can look at people like Kate as role models for our young coaches, saying, hey, there's a role for you, even if you don't want to continue on as a high performance athlete in whatever that sport is. There's a role for you in sports journalism. There's a role for you podcasting. There's a role for you in high level management of teams. My local hockey team, the Montreal Canadiens, more and more ownership has brought in women into senior management roles in the team. They're bringing in women consultants onto the team, as sports psychologists and stuff. There's so many roles for young women to find in sport, even if it's not in trying to become an Olympian.
And having, of course, a wife and 3 daughters, I'm assuming you all play outside together as well. And
yeah.
What does that look like for you and your family, and to see your daughters also enjoy the outdoors as much as you do?
Yeah, no, it's fun, right? Whether it's downhill skiing, which being my Nordic Canada side, I call it chairlift skiing, which kind of makes my daughters kind of roll at me. Because I call it, there's real skiing and then there's chairlift skiing. Because, as we say, real skiers ski uphill. But I'll be honest, I don't mind riding the chairlift once in a while as well. So whatever the snow conditions are, we look out the window and say, are we doing downhill? Are we alpine touring today? Are we cross country? We're doing cross country skate, or are we doing cross country classic? Whatever snow conditions are, let's go. So as a family, it's great. We love skiing together as a family, regardless of which discipline we choose. Skating, pond skating, right? If we're out in the country and there's outdoor ice to skate on, we'll do that, just outside in the driveway, playing one-on-one basketball in the summer or whatever it is. And then, canoes, anytime we're near water. My girls have now kicked me out of the stern seat. I have to sit on the bottom of the canoe because they want control of the canoe now. Or they just say, we're taking our own canoe now, Dad, get out of the way. We love going down to Maine in the summer sometimes, every summer on vacation. And the house that we rent for a week is on a bay. And the other side of the bay is this pier where the lobster fishermen come in, and we'll call, or, my dad will come with us, bring the grandparents, and my dad will place the order for lobster at a certain hour and say, my son and my granddaughters are coming to pick it up. We'll jump in the canoe and paddle across the bay just to go do drive-through lobster pickup, right? So it's, any excuse to get in a canoe or get in a sailboat. One of my daughters, Alexa, asked me to go sailing with her. I'm like, I'm not really that good in a sailboat. Like, I know windsurfing. I don't really know sailboats. And she just looks, don't worry, I do. I'm like, okay, let's go, right? And that's great. When the kids look at me and say, no, I'm paddling a canoe, or no, I'm sailing. Yeah, my job's done here.
Ted, thank you so much for your inspiration, and thank you for being an ally when it comes to female in sport and sharing your side of it. And thank you for promoting Fast and Female as well as Nordic Canada. That's great. I think a lot of listeners will be stoked by that.
Well, thanks for having me on. Loving the podcast. I listen to it quite regularly. So it's Matt who put me onto it. So, something else that we could positively blame on that. But this is good. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for listening. For more Let's Take This Outside, go to letstakethisoutside.ca.
Produced and distributed by the Sound Off Media Company.